Mela guys, nilqakom għad il-podcast tal-lum hija speċjali. Ħadd intervju lil Paola Harris. Mela, Paola Harris hija professur tagħallem, jiġifieri bniedma intelligenti ħafna, kitbet diversi kotba fuq il-UFOs, fosthom Conversation with Chronology u Trinity, The Best Kept Secret, u għandak tip ieħor Connecting the Dots. Ma Paola diskutejna fuq ħafna affarijiet differenti u fosthom fuq il-fenomenu, il-konxju tal-bniedem u l-ispiritualità. Il-qoddim għandna podcast oħra pjanata, suppost ma jinqala xejn ma' Paola u nispera li ssibuha interessanti. Grazzi ħafna u narakom guys.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Hello Paola. How are you, Paola?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, Paola, in light of the news and the information that is coming out, I wanted to speak to you about the book Trinity. I don't know if you heard about Jake Barber and the recovery of the egg UFO. Yes, the book Trinity.
Yeah, here's Trinity. Trinity is in French, Italian, and Spanish. So people can get it on Amazon.
Yes, but you have more books. The one that I like, Anna's Tale, is really good. It's about an alien abduction. But
what is it called?
Anna's Tale. Anne's Tale.
This is the best book. I don't know which one you're talking about. But
okay, yes, I don't have that one. Connect the dots.
I don't talk about alien abduction. I only talk to military, astronauts, and military astronauts. And Connecting the Dots has Zachariah Sitchin, John Mack, Ellen Hynek, Jacques Vallée, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14 astronaut. It has 38 interviews from NASA and all different very important people that know that this is real. And they knew that this was real a long time ago, before the government started all these questions and answers and everything. They know it was real from 1945, Trinity, and 1947, Roswell. So when I speak, I have spoken to the witnesses at Trinity. I have spoken to the witnesses in Roswell. Most of them have died. The Roswell people have died. So I have gone there, not on the phone. I have gone to Roswell. I've been in Roswell at least 10 times and Trinity at least 20 times.
Is it Mr. Padilla still alive?
Oh, yes. He's 86 years old. He's still alive. But Mr. Baca died in 2013. But I went to his house, so I have photos of me and Mr. Baca. I have movies. So I have two witnesses after 60 years with the same exact story. And they hadn't seen each other because one is in Washington State and one is in California. So they haven't seen each other, but they have the same exact detailed story.
How did you get to know about the case? How did you hear about the case?
I was in Italy. I was living in Italy from 1994 to 2005. And I read about it in a journal. 2 little boys that had seen a crash. And my first thought was, why aren't my colleagues, my research friends, why aren't they going to New Mexico to question them? But my research friends do not do field research. They do not read. They just do their own work. But when I came to America, 2005, I got a telephone call from the son of the pilot that flew over the area. It was Brophy. It was his last, William Brophy, his father's last mission, 1945. He flew over the area and he saw the 2 boys on horseback. And I got a call on the phone. So I have to tell you that a lot of my work is coincidence, synchronicity. I had read about it, but I did not know that I was supposed to do it. I wanted my research friends who lived in America to go there. But I realized it was me that was supposed to go there.
Synchronicity. And there were multiple witnesses to this event. There were the father of Padilla and his niece, I think. His niece, yeah. Also.
His niece.
So
and his niece and a cousin. I found a cousin. So because if you read the book, it's so interesting. When the crash happened, it spread all over this angel hair, this fine hair that was all lit up in yellow and purple and pink colors, all lit up, which it might be fiber optics, we don't know. But those boys put 10 pounds of it in a bag and they trimmed the Christmas trees with it and gave it to the Sabrina, the cousin. Yeah. And she was playing with it. And they gave it to another cousin, Faustino, and he took it and would put it down the back of his friends because it was very irritating. And he played with that. So we know that they're telling the truth because, and it's so difficult. 60 years later, we were able to find witnesses, but you cannot do this. You cannot wait 60 years for a story this big. It's just that that's how long it took because Jose, who is 86, stole a piece or took a piece from the inside of the craft, and he did not want to talk about it.
And your co-author, Jacques Vallée, made some tests on the was it a hinge, like a hinge, yeah? He took out of the...
No, it was big. It was a handle. It was this big. Yes, but I'm convinced. I took the piece to Mexico, and the analysis in Mexico is public. What was done in California is not public, and I am convinced that they will never, ever, ever reveal the truth in the United States. They just can't. It can't because it's top secret. That's the problem. Is it's not because you don't want to tell everybody UFOs are real, the craft is real, we have bodies. They don't care about that. They care about the manufacturing and the military industrial complex that has taken everything over the years and made technology. The technology is the secret,
to weaponize
not the bodies,
them.
not the craft. The problem is technology. And if you study this, you know there have been more than 100 crashes all over the world, including in Brazil, in Virginia, in Brazil. There have been some in Italy, 1933. There have been some there have been crashes in Latin America. And when I worked with Clifford Stone, who did crash retrieval, he went into the crashes. At least 5 of them were in the United States and 3 in Vietnam.
So I heard about the Vietnam cases also. There were occupants in it, and even in the Trinity accident there were occupants. So when Jose described the beings, they were like floating and shuffling around. So they don't walk or use the same, maybe because of the atmosphere or the gravity or something like this. Maybe it's technology, as you said. How many species? I read.
Wait a minute, and they were crying. They were also crying. So it's not gravity. I think they're artificial intelligence. I think they're clones. I think somebody created them, because Colonel Corso told me that the bodies that he had were clones. In other words, they were created. They're not people. They were clones to fly the craft. So we need to think, because Colonel Corso, in the book I wrote about him, told me that there was a microchip in the brain. In the autopsy, if there's a microchip in the brain, somebody created these beings to fly the ship. And Colonel Corso told me he was worried about who created them. So those little beings, even though they were crying, Jose thought they were hurt. I think they were clones.
And they had some telepathic communication, contact.
Yeah.
And the message is always the same, like to take care of the planet, but they were in distress at the moment, and it's really interesting. So about Clifford, he talks about 57 different species of aliens. And he talks about the Vietnam ones, which I find it funny. I was watching an interview of a veteran, and he was talking about engaging small people, which I think it's something really...
Well, people need to know that when I knew him very well, but I knew him because I went to Roswell where he was living. I've been to his house at least, 10 times. So in the last years, he died 2 years. So I was going to his house and I was asking him, and he said he had a first aid manual. That means a book with 57 drawings and 57 ways that they could help them. So a first aid manual means that when you get there and they're hurt, you don't put alcohol on a being that could die. So he didn't make up that number. And then Colonel Corso told me 52 different species. And our problem is that we only go with Nordic, reptilian, and gray. And most of the extraterrestrials that I have studied look like us. They are exactly like us. And they create these other beings. They create them. And Vietnam was important to Clifford because he was in Vietnam, but those beings were watching the war. And they were in a cave. And he said the cave had a transparent window, and they were watching the war. So you have to think, if they come here, then today they're watching Ukraine and Russia, and they're watching all the places where there's war. And when I go to Jaime Maussan's office in Mexico City, I see UFOs over Israel, I see UFOs over Russia, China, that you do not see in this country. I see videos that they are watching the war. They are watching places where there's conflict. And I can only see that if I go to Mexico City or Jaime Maussan's place, because he has a UFO office of I don't know how many people who have these videos. So you can see today we're still being visited, but mostly in war zones.
Haum is really interesting guy, because sometimes they say he's a hoax, but now the alien bodies that they found, they're saying that are real. So he...
Well, they are real. I talked to the doctor. I went to the hospital where the bodies were, and I talked to the doctor. The problem is with anything that you analyze, it takes money. And Jaime was able to pay for the microscope, for the DNA testing, for the carbon testing. It's thousands of dollars. And you can't argue unless you pay to have it examined. And he's the only one that can afford to have the microscope, the DNA, the carbon. And I went to the hospital where the mummy was, and I have pictures of me with the doctor, and the doctor is a real forensic doctor, and he did the real tests. But I don't, you have to remember one thing, I don't necessarily think they are extraterrestrial. There is a lot of bodies and creatures here on Earth that live here on Earth that are not from another planet.
So
they just exist on Earth.
So like a breakaway civilization?
Well, breakaway. I mean, I believe that there does exist a Sasquatch or a Yeti or something. Or I went to Barcelona, Spain to see the Atacama being, which has been tested. And it's this big. And Ramon told me that there are many, many of these in Chile, in the Atacama Desert. They're not extraterrestrial. They are creatures that exist. And I wouldn't call it a civilization because we don't know, but they don't come from outer space. So we need to look at the cryptoids, as part of a study, but not extraterrestrial necessarily. So yes, and Jaime is not a hoaxer. He's like me, an investigative journalist. So if I'm a journalist, I can't go to someplace and say, I'm not going to cover the story.
And he has
I have to do the story.
He has some of the best videos, the ones that you told me last time, the UFO going out of the volcano. And you also had an encounter down there in South America with something strange. I was hearing you on Jim Church. You had an experience.
Oh, no, I had many encounters in South America, but the encounter you mean is in Shasta, Mount Shasta. It's in Mount Shasta with Ricardo Gonzalez. The Latin American people in 1970, but you must study this like you study you must study this like you go to college, you go to the university and you study. I studied the human alien problem in 1950-53 with Adamski and everything in Southern California. Those beings went to the Chilca Desert with Sisto Paz in 1970. And I talked to the witnesses that saw men coming off spaceships. So when I got to Ricardo Gonzalez, and he had an encounter in the Chilca Desert, Peru, I went to the spot where he had the encounter. And I studied that case. It was a 10-foot tall giant. And the giant spoke to him. And that whole story is in Ricardo Gonzalez's books. And that is the encounter I had at Shasta, the 10-foot tall man standing next to a tree. So the problem is not abduction. There is no abduction anymore. They don't need 40 years of DNA. You can get it off a glass. Okay? Stupid. That is done to scare everybody. If you have an encounter, you have contact, like Carl Sagan said. You have contact, not abduction. And so if you have contact, then you need to find out why. And then if there is a message, then you need to tell people. And right now, the planet is in conflict. So if you have contact, you need to bring everybody together. And the message in Latin America is come together. And I have been in Peru, in the Chilca Desert. I've been twice in Atacama, in the Atacama Desert. Of course, camping under the stars and everything. And there is phenomena going on in those deserts. They are not going on in New York City.
Because there are less people in the rural places, I think. And
but apart from people, there's no airplanes in the Atacama Desert. There's no flight path. And it doesn't happen. You have to meditate and you have to invite. You don't just sit there. You meditate for a world peace, and then they come.
No, the first time that I talked to you, you told me something about the spiritual connection between the phenomenon of UFO. And at first, all right, I saw 3 times UFOs. Once when I was 10, once in 2009, and once in 2019. And 2019, I started this podcast and interviewing people, mainly on the island. And through that, then I went through how to say, like a spiritual journey to find some stuff that I wasn't aware of, or I was aware of, but I didn't believe it, like the out of body experience, which I tried it and it worked somehow. But the message, the way I saw it, because we did CA5 also, and it works when I wasn't there. But
it works.
But when
it does work.
When I saw the UFO in 2019, it came down like how you say? I was scared. I felt like I was something pushing me down. I was scared. I don't know, and I started this podcast just for the question: what did it mean? What's the message? Why me? Because I'm just a baker, but I ended up doing the podcast and interviewing people on UFOs and paranormal. So the message, it looks the same, I think, to take care of the planet and stop the wars. You also had you also went to a place where there were many bodies before a disaster. There were 2 beings that warned the place.
Which place do you mean?
There was a disaster, and before the disaster, there were 2 beings. They came to warn the people, and after you went there, you told me last.
Oh yeah. Yes, that's part of Ricardo Gonzalez's book. The 10-foot tall being said that he is related to us because we have had a disaster on the planet, a nuclear disaster. He is from Apu. Apu is in the constellation of Alpha Centauri. They just found that planet. And in 1970, the Antarel, the Apunians, have a base in a mountain in Peru called Huascaran. And went to Huascaran. And I talked to the people, and the Apunians had warned the Vlado Kapitanovich, who was the Russian who dealt with the hydraulic plant, the water, that there was going to be an earthquake in Yungay, and part of the mountain was going to come up. And Kapitanovich could do nothing because nobody believed him. But it happened. And I went to Yungay, and it killed 45,000 people, and they could not bury them. So they put dirt all over the city, and the bodies are under the dirt. And I walked on the dirt, and they built a church and everything, but I walked over those bodies, and I knew that the Apunians were time travelers, and that's very difficult. You must understand, time travel for me is very difficult. It's difficult to believe. It's difficult. But those beings who are human, but they're very tall, warned. Now, I was in a bed and breakfast under a Huascaran, the mountain. I was in a bed and breakfast. And I asked the lady, I said, do you know the people that live in that mountain? And she said, yes. My husband sees them walking up the mountain. And then she said, they came to see my children when they were 10 years old. I said, those extraterrestrials came to talk to your children when they were 10? And she said, yes. And then she continued cooking for me. So it was nothing. It was nothing to her. All the Latin American people that have contact are the campesitos, the peasants in the field, the people, the normal everyday people, and they have contact, and it's nothing. It's normal.
For them?
It's the brothers from the stars.
But if you talk...
It's the brothers from the stars.
But if you talk to people that don't live on the land, like us who live in the city, they won't believe you. Like in Malta, they associate it with religion. We have a case here, Juza Mifsud. She was a lady that she lived off the land, and she was taking out the goats to eat, for the goats to eat, and she had an apparition. And she associated with the Holy Mary, and we have found out that it's the most radioactive place in Malta. The section of the field. Maybe are two combination, a message and because of the radiation in the place. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, but you have to think when you see something strange. You think of religion. What else do you think of? You can't think of anything else. So, of course, even Fatima, the miracle of the sun was a UFO. The Vatican knows that. And I talked to Joaquin Fernandez, who wrote the book on Fatima, and those three children did not see the Virgin Mary. They saw a lady, a short lady. So, we have to, they have to attach it to religion. What can they attach it to? They don't have a frame of reference. It's okay if they attach it to religion. It's okay because the message is still peace, yes. World peace. It doesn't matter if it's religion, extraterrestrials, or something. The message is, unless you come together in world peace as one species, you will destroy the planet and yourselves. So our job and your job is just to try to bring people together.
This lady had written to Gorbachev and Bush also at the time, and they responded back to her, which was very interesting. You also have close to our island the Amicizia case. That was.
But you have to remember, when I do a case, you have to look at the date. The date. What I told you happened in the Chilka Desert was 1970. In 1973, beings came down in Switzerland to Billy Meyer. That is a real case. I went to Switzerland. I talked to Wendell Stevens, 1973. So we have had visitations. Look at the date. The problem with Amicizia, it's 1956. You were not even born yet. So you have to look at what happened in Pescara in 1956, where these beings did an experiment with 10 Italians, and they called it friendship. But these beings had a base in Pescara, and they lived in a castle. And I went to Pescara many times, and I interviewed Gaspera Di Lama. It's on my YouTube, who's 92 years old, who was part of that experiment. What I didn't understand is that women were part of it too, because his wife was part of it. She also was part of the experiment of friendship. Amicizia means friendship. And they said to the Italians, we can stay with you as long as you do not fight among yourselves. If you fight and you fight with each other, we have to leave, because we have a technology called ureda, which means harmony. It's a technology, and we cannot stay with people that are fighting. And I know this. Gaspera Di Lama told me this. So I have the voices of the extraterrestrials on the telephone. He gave me Stefano Brescia, who wrote the book Mass Contacts, gave me the voices of the extraterrestrials speaking in Italian and French. And they were together for about 10 years. And then the Italians started to fight. They started to say, oh, you saw them, I didn't see them. Oh, you went there, why didn't I go? And then the case disintegrated. The ETs, the extraterrestrials, left. They left. And then I covered Chile Amicizia, and that was 1980. Not the same. It was not the same as Italy, because those beings were on an island and were healing people, the island of Chiloé. And if you go to my YouTube, I interviewed Octavio Ortiz, that said those beings came to his house, saw his wife and children, and they look like us, human. And so I was trying, and this is 1980. So 1956, there was an experiment in Italy, but they said it was in Germany and other places too. In 1980, they tried it in Chile. So extraterrestrials have tried to come down and live among us to see if there's harmony, And there's very little harmony. And today, not 2025, is a horrible year for harmony. So I don't think the extraterrestrials want to come and live with us.
Which was the last known landing contact we had? Because last I heard, I think was something 2008, 2009, or 2010, somewhere like there.
Well, I don't know, because I'm trying to do the work chronologically. I began 1945, 1947, 1950. All the people, Adamski, Menger, and all that saw the people from Venus, Antonio Eugenio Siracusa at the same time. By the way, I have a letter from President Eisenhower to contactee Eugenio Siracusa in Italy, saying that he would do his best, he and his wife would do his best for world peace. I have the letter. So the presidents know. And then from that to the Latin Americans, 1973, Sisto Paz in the Chilca Desert, Peru. Peru is the best place. The Andes is the best place. And then from there, you go to Billy Meyer, 1973. Very short time. And then I don't know any other documented cases done. The Billy Meyer case was done by Wendell Stevens, the greatest researcher that ever lived. Colonel Wendell Stevens of the Air Force. So, I don't know today I'm following Ricardo Gonzalez because I was with him in the Valle de la Luna in Atacama when the ships were there, and he was having contact. So Latin America is really the place where most of the contact is happening. But I can't see, when I went there, I can't afford to do this anymore. I'm 80 years old.
You look younger. You look younger.
I know, and I can't camp anymore in the desert, and I can't do this anymore. But it's in my books. But now I'll tell you, because you said you were talking about spiritual. I am lecturing in Japan, and I like the Eastern countries, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Thailand, Vietnam, all those countries that have a spiritual philosophy. It's easier for me to lecture because this is not about UFOs. This is about raising consciousness and becoming unified with the planet. It is not about UFOs. I mean, if it's about UFOs, I have so much. I have 7 books of data. I mean, I talked to Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14 astronaut. I talked to people at NASA. I talked to a lot of people that dealt with UFOs, extraterrestrials. It doesn't make a difference. Nobody cares. It doesn't matter. What matters is the message.
Do you think, because Jacques talks about the phenomenon being a trickster, do you think part of the phenomenon is a trickster?
Yes. Yes, because in the case of Billy Meyer, the Pleiadians had him film them, and then at the very end they were saying things that were crazy. So, but it was the Pleiadians that were doing it, not Billy. So I think that the phenomenon says, "Here I am, look up," and then it disappears. The phenomenon is a trickster, and it's telling you to pay attention. But then you say, pay attention to what? And they say, pay attention to you. It is not about us. It's about you. So that's the trickster. They could have disclosure in 2 minutes if UFOs went over every airport. And they did. They went over the Beijing airport.
And O'Hare also.
And they went over Beijing airport, and the Beijing in China had to shut down over UFOs. They went over O'Hare airport in Chicago. I was there to do the story on under the United Airlines. The UFO was there, but people just don't make any difference. So the thing is, if they did it at the same time, there would be disclosure. But I am convinced they don't want disclosure. They don't want it because we are not ready as a species to become part of a cosmic family. We are not ready. Look around you and see what is happening. Do we have a collective empathy, collective love, a collective consciousness? No. And why would they want to come here to a bunch of primitive people who are fighting over money and boundaries? So I think the extraterrestrials don't want disclosure. So they're tricksters. They're going to come to you and they're going to show themselves and then they're going to disappear.
Yeah, it seems like humanity is immersed in technology on social media, and everybody is lost on other stuff. But if a phenomenon happens and would be a mass sighting, I think that would be disclosure, as you say. So, Paola, you have any projects in for the future?
Well, the thing, for me, I'm a professor. I have a master's in education. All of my material at my age is at Rice University in Houston. So all the audio tape, because all my books are word for word audio tape, is in Houston, Texas, at Rice University. All the photographs and videos are in Houston, Texas. But my dream is to teach people the history of contact. So I have a show with Mausan Television, which is a cable channel 3.3 in Latin America. So I have begun chronologically, which means 1945, then 1947 Kenneth Arnold, then 1950, 53 Damsky. I've started to teach on these programs the history of what happened in contact with all the photographs and all the interviews, because I interview these people. And so that show is only in Spanish and it's in Latin America. My dream, though, is to work in Japan, because I want to go back to Japan to speak to the Asian people who already have a base of spirituality. Tibet, they have all of their philosophy, and I didn't realize there was a connection with Tibet. I mean, Ricardo Gonzalez studied Nicholas Roerich. The first peace flag comes from Tibet in China. That white flag with the 3 red dots is the stones of Chintamani, the wisdom given by the extraterrestrials, and it was given in Tibet. So I have to then switch from the Western thinking, because I was born in Italy, I'm Italian, to the Eastern thinking to understand the philosophy with which the extraterrestrials use to try to unite us. So my dream is to go back to Japan, to go back to work in the Eastern countries. But my show is in Latin America, it's in Spanish. And so I'm going crazy, I'm everywhere. So thank you for inviting me to be with you. And
I'm honored to talk to you.
And thank you for doing the podcast for the people of Malta, because it's very, very important that you do something.
I would love to invite you again if you would like to to expand more on this small on what we have discussed. What do you think?
Well, yes, later in a couple of months, because
yes, for sure.
I'm trying to work with the Japanese right now to do something, but yes, please keep cast and try to unite. Unite.
I'm trying. We have a page, Kuntattu for Malta. I gained over 20,000 followers, somewhere like that. And we're trying to inform the people of Malta. And my co-host is inviting other ufologists from around the world also. And we're trying to set the people to know about the consciousness and the phenomenon, everything that is connected all together.
Well, I have the phone calls from the Amicizia case, and Sigir, who is the very, very tall alien, in the phone call says, "Unita, unita, unita," which means unite in Italian, unite. In Italian. And I have the extraterrestrial voice saying, "Unita, unita, unita," and I can only follow the fact that they, I think, have a higher consciousness and are wiser than we are. They're more intelligent. They're more evolved than we are. So yeah, that is the message. Even though if you want to know the details, I have 7 books on Amazon that have just interviews, not my thought. my thought is just, I don't know everything, but I know there's a spiritual component. So, so they can go on Amazon, and I just translated Connecting the Dots into Japanese, and it's in Italian. It's in Italian and French. So, I'm trying to share my work. It's work, but in the end, the message as they're coming are from the heart, because you can't use your head. We don't have a science. We don't have a logic that you can connect with the extraterrestrial. So it's a heart connection. Heart. So that's what I learned in Latin America.
Paola, this is my last podcast for the time I will come back. That's why I wanted to do this one for last. And I will be back in a few months also, so we can talk again on what we have discussed, and we can expand more. Thank you, Paola.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you very much.